Hello, I'm Jack Blanchard.
And I'm Megan Messerly. It's Tuesday, June 24th.
And this is the Playbook Podcast. And Megan is back with us again. Thank you so much for joining us again, Megan.
Of course, I'm happy to be here as always.
Such a pleasure to have you. Dasha Burns, for those wondering, is over at The Hague for the NATO Summit, which is where Donald Trump is headed this morning. And we will definitely be getting into that in just a moment. Of course, war and peace will dominate the day's events again following that dramatic, shall we say, announcement by Donald Trump last night of a ceasefire in the Middle East. So we will talk all about that on the podcast today. Just a couple of other things to flag for you guys. There's quite a lot happening on Capitol Hill today. We've got Jay Powell, the chair of the Fed, will be up at 10 a.m. and you can expect there will be lots of discussion about interest rates, as you can imagine. And at the same time, RFK Jr., the Health and Human Services Secretary, will be in the House as well. And you can expect Democrats to be going at him about his new panel of vaccine quote unquote experts. So lots going on over on the Hill, as well as still the ongoing discussions about the big, beautiful bill. And just the other headline to flag for this morning is in New York, there is the Democrat primary for the mayoral race that's happening this fall. And that's a fascinating story, which I'm sure loads of you have been following already. Basically, it turned into a two-horse race between the former New York governor, Andrew Cuomo, and New York State Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani. And so it'll be fascinating to see who comes out on top there as well. But let's talk about the Middle East. You were in the White House yesterday, Megan, for our White House team, and dropped out of nowhere at 6 p.m. Donald Trump on Truth Social announcing a ceasefire, or what he said would be a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. Did you get any heads up in the White House that this was coming? Did you know something big was about to happen?
It's one of those things where you think you're going to be able to feel it, but no, we had no idea. And I would say the mood in the White House was the reporters and the photographers, they all hang out, and we usually get what's called a lid around 6 p.m., which means, we're not going to see the president again. Everyone can go home. Obviously, we know he keeps truthing well into the evening, but that means we can physically leave the White House. And so people were like, oh, it's 6:01. Are we going to get a lid? And then no, instead we got a truth about a ceasefire. So no, it came as a shock.
And what's it like in the press corridor or whatever at that time? Does the whole place just erupt into activity? Is everyone kind of going nuts and rushing around trying to figure out what's happened?
One of my editors was asking me about this too yesterday, and you'd expect it to be a little bit more frenetic. I would say it's just a quiet sense of urgency. Though I will say there were a couple times where there was a reporter running down the hallway past my desk. But otherwise, it's a lot of sort of quiet tittering, if you can imagine it like that. And lots of going to bug the press folks and folks in the White House, asking them for more details about what this means. The president's truth didn't have a lot of detail about the terms of the ceasefire and just had sort of the time frame of it. So there were still a lot of questions TBD. And so that's what we were all running around the White House trying to figure out.
You bet. And we have some more details of it this morning, but I suspect there's still an awful lot more to come out over the next day or two about exactly what happened. We may hear some more from Donald Trump this morning. He's due on the South Lawn at 6 a.m. So just shortly after this podcast goes out. Might already have happened for some of you who are already listening to it, because he's flying off to the Netherlands for this NATO summit this morning. So I would imagine he'll be grabbed by journalists on his way into Marine One and may have some things to say. As best we understand it, it sounds like Donald Trump had a call with Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday afternoon. That's what the White House are saying, and then set up various calls with the Iranian side via the intermediary being the Emir of Qatar. And through those calls with both sides, appears to have reached an agreement when the bombing would stop. Is that basically, as you understand what happened?
Yep, that's exactly it. Yeah, a senior White House official told me that the president was really responsible for handling conversations with Prime Minister Netanyahu, while it was Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who handled talks with the Iranians both directly and indirectly, as you mentioned, the Qataris serving as an intermediary force there. Sort of through those channels, they were able to sort of cobble together this deal. Of course, one thing that official added was that for Israel, this was predicated on no further attacks from Iran. They said, we'll agree to the ceasefire, but only insofar as Iran does not continue to this. And Iran, that official said, agreed to the terms as well. And that's where we are right now.
That's where we are right now. Absolutely. So we are recording this just a few hours after this ceasefire was meant to take hold. If we are in a world where it does hold and this does turn out to be as it has been presented by the president, and that is as best we can know it, that does appear to be the case right now, this is looking like a pretty big win for Donald Trump, is it not? If you look at where we were at the weekend, the fears and the worries about the bombing raids that he launched, if you look at where we were a week ago, this huge uncertainty about Israel and Iran, and would America be sucked in? Would there be a huge regional war? Suddenly it feels like we are where we were a couple of weeks ago, except Iran's capabilities have been hugely degraded, if not destroyed. And that's it. No comeback.
Yeah, I think that's a striking thing about this moment for a lot of folks is the president is perhaps not always known to be the most deliberate or strategic thinker. He sort of acts on his gut and makes a lot of sort of impulse decisions based on, what he thinks is right in the moment. And yet I think we have seen in the events of the last week, and especially the events of the last 48, 72 hours, this immense level of planning and negotiation that has brought us again to this moment where we're at, which is really quite striking. And I think even for some of the president's supporters as well, it's striking. I was talking to folks last week who, are more on the dovish, non-interventionist side of MAGA world. And they were, a little worried. Like they weren't going to say it quite so much in public, but a lot of them privately were very worried. And now talking to some of them yesterday after deals of the ceasefire came out, they feel like they were told to trust the process and they did. And they feel very vindicated in that.
This feels very different on its own terms as it stands today. It feels like he will certainly feel, and his supporters will certainly feel, that he made the right call and that this has been an incredibly successful operation for both the United States and for Israel. And that being the case, he will see this trip to NATO today, Megan, as a bit of a victory lap now, won't he? He can arrive at this meeting of world leaders of the Western Alliance and say, look what I've just done, taken out one of the biggest threats to regional, if not global stability, as we've all seen it. And you should all be patting me on the back and saying thank you very much. And I don't suppose he'll be shy about saying any of that either, knowing Donald Trump.
No, he's already been billing himself as this master peacemaker and Truth Social. I think the one thing, too, that's really interesting is he's managed to not only sort of appease the parts of his base that don't want to see intervention, but we even saw positive comments from, Senator Lindsey Graham after all of this, right? Even the folks who wanted to see more substantial action, right? They got that in form of the strike over the weekend on Iran. And so there's sort of like a little bit of something for everyone in this within the MAGA coalition. And so, yes, to your point, the president is certainly going to be taking a victory lap on this, on the issue of defense spending. I mean, there's a lot of things he's going to want to be talking about at the NATO summit.
You bet. I mean, the NATO summit has already been set up as a victory lap for Donald Trump. It's been choreographed for months, hasn't it? Ever since they went over to Munich in February and started talking about a 5% spending target. NATO allies have been bending over backwards, fretting, trying to figure out how on earth they can agree to something that looks vague like that. I mean, America, to be clear, doesn't spend anything like 5% of its GDP on defense. Is a huge target. And they have found a way. What they're basically going to agree to is a 3.5% defense spending target, and then an extra 1.5% on like stuff that's sort of related to defense, which I suspect is going to get increasingly vague and umbrella-like over the years ahead. And by the way, we're not actually going to hit this target for about 10 years, just to be clear as well. But nevertheless, it will be presented as a huge win. And to be clear, it is a big win for the president. There is no doubt Europe is spending and going to spend a huge, great deal more money on defense than it otherwise would have done had it not been for the pressure from him.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is something he's wanted since his first term. It's been sort of his one of his favorite talking points. And so the ceasefire between Israel and Iran is sort of the cherry on top of how the president would like to see himself on the global stage, right? I think there's been a lot of talk about America first and what does it mean? And does it mean being isolationist? But I think what we're seeing with NATO, with defense spending and with the ceasefire is sort of the America First image that the president has in his own mind of what it means to be, the one who comes and steps in on the global stage and brokers peace and holds people's feet to the fire when he thinks they're not, investing their fair share or whatever. This is sort of like his idea of America First. And I think that's what we're sort of seeing embodied in this current moment. And that's what we'll see on stage at the NATO summit.
Let me just give 2 or 3 caveats. One is, I was listening to the French President Emmanuel Macron yesterday making the point that there was no legal basis at all for what America just did. They were not under imminent threat of attack. They were not provoked in any meaningful way. There was not some big United Nations meeting and resolution and agreement. They just went ahead and started bombing another country. And are we all fine with that? I just pose the question, in a world of rules-based order and all that, is it okay for America just to go and start dropping bombs on countries? Whether or not you think Iran should be developing weapons will be one question. There's also a sort of process question, which the Democrats are still very keen to talk about should Congress have been more involved in this. There's certainly some Democrats who believe that they should have done. There is, of course, a counter-argument to that about presidents of both sides doing military strikes in different ways without talking to Congress first. And I guess that's what Donald Trump will be pointing at. And the third thing I would just say is we still don't know how successful these strikes actually were, right, in terms of degrading or destroying Iran's nuclear program. The president tells us there was a triumph. J.D. Vance was on Fox News last night, totally destroyed. It's the end of it. It'll never happen again. Well, I don't think we know that or they know that. And let's revisit this in a year, right, and see what's going on with Iran at that point. And I guess for the time being, they'll take the win, but we don't know where this is all going to end up.
Exactly. I think one thing too worth noting is that we saw this retaliatory strike from Iran, launching missiles toward the U.S. airbase in Qatar. And the response to that from the president was sort of, hey, they had their shot. They got it out of their system. He used that wording. Now we're good. And now we're going to have peace. And that was the message that he was putting out even before he announced the ceasefire, right? And some folks might say, like, Iran just fired missiles at a U.S. airbase. How is that sort of foreshadowing peace? But I think it does speak to this, interesting moment that we're in. And you have him sort of claiming victory in this moment. But I think it's worth noting that when it comes to foreign adversaries, when it comes to Iran, they're really playing this long game here. So I think even again, though we're couching sort of this current moment maybe as a victory for the Trump administration, to your point, like this is really a longer term conversation, when it comes to Iran's nuclear capacity, when it comes to actions Iran might continue to take against the United States. So we have to also have like a longer term view about this as well.
You bet. But in the meantime, you will all have to watch Donald Trump celebrating his win in the Netherlands today. It'll be evening their time. It'll be this afternoon here in DC. And no doubt he'll have plenty more to say. Megan, we better stop there. Before we finish, we always try and do something a bit more lighthearted on this podcast, just to put you in a good mood at the end of the podcast. And what we sometimes do is pick out a birthday from the Playbook newsletter. And I've been going through the list looking for someone we can shout out happy birthday to, and whose name jumped out at me but Megan Messerly of Politico. Happy birthday. I can't believe it. This is how you're celebrating on this podcast. I'm so
Thank
pleased.
you so much. There's no better way to celebrate my birthday than with you, Jack, and doing the thing I love doing the most, reporting the news, talking about the news. So I couldn't ask for a better birthday present.
That's very nice of you to say. I think there may be one or two better ways, and I hope you might do one of them this evening.
Yes, well, that's up to the president and what he has on tap for today. So we'll see.
Don't leave it up to him. Okay, thanks very much, Megan. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening. That's all we got time for on today's show. We have much more news and analysis in today's Playbook newsletter, which you can find at politico.com/playbook. And we'll be back tomorrow. Have a great Tuesday.